So last year, there was this Fortune 500 company,
Right.
and they plugged a state-of-the-art, entirely autonomous AI into their workflow, just to speed up client processing.
Naturally. I mean, that's what everyone is trying to do right now.
Right. And it worked instantly. I mean, it worked so well that it automatically approved $12 million in fraudulent claims.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, in under 3 minutes.
That is, well, it's terrifying, but honestly, it's not entirely surprising.
Exactly. So welcome to the deep dive. We're looking at the realities of enterprise AI today. And if you are listening to this, you are probably trying to navigate a landscape that feels, honestly, just fundamentally unstable.
Yes, shifting under your feet constantly.
Right. As someone tracking the pace of innovation, you're likely bombarded by vendors promising a magic bullet. A piece of software that will instantly organize your data, streamline your workforce, and basically usher your business into this frictionless utopia.
And the allure of that promise is incredibly powerful, especially when the technology demonstrating these capabilities, like, large language models, packing bar exams, or writing functional code in seconds, it feels like magic.
It really does.
But the gap between a controlled laboratory demo and a live, messy corporate ecosystem is, well, it's vast. And the most resilient technological transformations, the ones that actually survive contact with reality, they completely reject that magical thinking.
Yeah, they rely on rigid, often super unglamorous architecture. Which brings us to our single source for this deep dive. Okay, let's unpack this. We are analyzing a methodology document from Cocobites Solutions.
Right, and just the title alone sets a completely different tone from the usual marketing hype.
Yeah, it's called Architecting the Uncharted Bridge: Foundations for Agentic AI.
It's quite a title.
It is. And this isn't, a white paper about neural network parameter counts or the complex math behind transformer models. We are going to deconstruct how businesses can actually transition from isolated, overhyped AI pilots to sustainable, measured business results.
Exactly, because the core argument here is that implementing next-generation AI without triggering an operational collapse, like your $12 million example, requires a ruthless focus on foundational maturity.
Right. So the stakes outlined in the document are critical because the nature of the technology has fundamentally changed. We aren't just talking about, better spell check anymore.
No, not at all. When we talk about agentic AI, we are not talking about a passive tool like a spreadsheet or even a standard conversational chatbot.
Yeah, the ones where you just type a question and get a text answer.
Right. You are introducing an autonomous entity, one that's capable of multi-step reasoning, tool use, and independent action right into your corporate infrastructure.
Which is a huge leap.
Massive. And if that introduction is driven by hype rather than architectural philosophy, the result isn't an upgrade. It is just the automated acceleration of your existing structural flaws.
Which is exactly what happened to that Fortune 500 company.
Precisely.
So, to prevent that acceleration, Cocobites insists on a mandatory first step before a single line of new code is even deployed. They call it the hymn sheet audit.
I love this concept.
Yeah, the premise is that before building any intelligent systems, a comprehensive digital audit has to prove that the entire operation is, quite literally, singing from the same hymn sheet.
And the metaphor is so instructive here.
Yeah.
Because it really highlights the absolute necessity of underlying harmony. I mean, think about a choir.
Okay.
You can have 100 world-class voices, right? But if the sopranos are reading from a Mozart score and the tenors are improvising some jazz standards.
This noise.
Exactly. The sheer vocal power becomes completely irrelevant. The output is dissonance.
Right.
And agentic AI acts as a massive amplification system for your organization's operational score. If the underlying data architecture, the departmental workflows, the security protocols, if those are out of sync, the AI will simply amplify that noise to a deafening level.
I hear that, but I actually want to push back on that a bit because the central pitch of modern AI-like, the whole reason companies are authorizing these massive multi-million-dollar enterprise licenses is precisely that these models can handle unstructured chaos.
Wow.
I mean, vendors constantly claim their systems can ingest messy data, parse the context, and just magically make sense of it all. So why should a company spend 6 months undergoing a painful hymn sheet audit to manually organize their systems when an LLM with a massive context window can just read the entire directory and figure out what's what?
What's fascinating here is that people confuse parsing text with understanding operational logic. They are two entirely different technical functions.
Okay, how so?
Well, an LLM can absolutely summarize a messy folder of PDF contracts. It's great at that. But agentic AI relies on frameworks like React reasoning and acting.
Right, the acting part being the key difference.
Exactly. It doesn't just read. It executes API calls based on what it reads. So let's look at how an autonomous agent actually interacts with unstructured data. Say it uses RE, or retrieval augmented generation, to search a corporate database for a policy.
Okay, so it's pulling specific information to answer a prompt.
Right. And it relies on semantic similarity to do that. But if your system lacks strict version control, the agent might retrieve a dynamically generated text chunk from, say, an outdated 2022 compliance manual.
Because the wording in the old manual just happened to match the user's question better.
Precisely. The phrasing is semantically closer to the prompt than the highly technical, newly revised 2026 manual. So the agent then confidently executes a workflow based on totally deprecated legal standards.
Oh, wow. Because it doesn't have the institutional memory to know that the 2022 document was superseded by some unwritten departmental policy shift.
Exactly, which is precisely the opposite of the intelligence we project onto it.
Yeah.
The AI is goal-oriented, sure, but it completely lacks the contextual wisdom that comes from human governance.
Right, it doesn't know what it doesn't know.
Yeah. And there is a really striking revelation in the Cocobites document regarding these audits. Frequently, when a company brings them in to deploy this sophisticated neural network to solve massive workflow inefficiencies,
Yeah.
the audit reveals they don't actually need AI at all.
Wait, really?
Really.
Yeah.
They just need to properly configure the infrastructure they have already been paying for over the last half-decade.
That is wild.
The source specifically calls out Microsoft Azure and SharePoint in this context.
Oh, man. SharePoint. I mean, this really gets to the mechanics of technical foundational rot.
Oh, absolutely.
Because if you take SharePoint, it's a robust enterprise collaboration platform, supposedly. But in most organizations, it just devolves into a digital junk drawer.
A junk drawer is the perfect way to describe it.
Right. Employees just dump files into root directories without applying any metadata taxonomy. There are no enforced term stores, no standardized naming conventions, and you've got broken inheritance on access permissions everywhere.
And when an organization with a setup like that asks for an AI solution, they're essentially asking for a technological band-aid. They're trying to cover up a behavioral failure.
Yeah, that makes sense. So people are essentially trying to drop a massive high-performance jet engine into a car that currently has flat tires.
Yes, great analogy. And if you deploy an agentic system with broad read and write access into that unoptimized SharePoint environment, the agent is flying blind.
Because it can't tell the difference between the junk and the important stuff.
Right. Think about it. If you have a file named Project Alpha Final and another name Project Alpha Draft V2,
I have absolutely been guilty of naming files like that, by the way.
we all have.
Yeah.
But to the AI, those might appear semantically identical. However, to the human project managers, those represent legally distinct phases.
So the AI might just pull draft data and push it into a live production pipeline.
Indiscriminately, without a second thought. That's why the hymn sheet audit forces the company to, actually apply metadata tagging, establish retention policies, and strictly enforce version control.
And the Azure cloud infrastructure is an even higher stakes example mentioned in the text. I mean, companies constantly complain about slow processing or data bottlenecks or these just exorbitant cloud bills.
Right.
And they assume a smarter AI algorithm will somehow optimize the flow and fix the billing issue.
And what the audit usually finds instead is a sprawling, totally ungoverned Azure environment. You've got resource groups that are misaligned. You have identity and access management, the IAM roles that are way too permissive.
Meaning too many people have the keys to the castle.
Exactly. And virtual machines are over-provisioned and just left running idly, burning money.
So if you drop an autonomous AI agent into that mess?
Well, if you grant it the ability to spin up compute instances to solve complex problems, it will do exactly what it is programmed to do.
Which is?
It will bypass inefficient network routes by brute forcing new virtual machines.
Oh, no.
Yeah. It could potentially incur exponential cloud computing costs over a single weekend. And the thing is, the AI didn't fail. The foundational guardrails failed.
Wow, that completely strips the romance out of digital transformation entirely. It frames operational maturity not as a nice to have, but as a literal critical safety prerequisite.
That's exactly what it is.
It really challenged anyone listening to this deep dive to look at their own professional environments. Before adopting the next automated workflow tool, the question isn't what can this tool do, but rather, Is our data infrastructure disciplined enough to survive this tool?
Yeah, it forces a confrontation with reality.
Yeah.
Because establishing data governance, mapping IAM roles, cleaning up legacy databases, those are universally despised tasks
Oh, nobody wants to do that.
because they are tedious. But the Cocobites methodology insists that facing the music and tuning the instruments is non-negotiable.
You literally aren't allowed to proceed otherwise.
Right. Only when the audit proves that a stable foundation exists, or after the company undergoes the really painful work to build one, does the methodology actually permit the application of agentic AI.
So what does this all mean? Because that pivot moving from assessing the present to actually building the future, that introduces a whole new vulnerability.
It does.
We've seen organizations do the hard work, right? They clean their data environments, they establish the perfect clean room, and then they completely ruin it because they give the new AI pilot way too much unsupervised freedom.
That happened constantly.
So how does the methodology prevent a company from reverting to hype-driven decisions the very moment the new technology is switched on?
Well, the document outlines a highly restrictive consultative methodology for the implementation phase. They operate under a really strict mandate, build exclusively to approved requirements.
Approved requirements.
Okay. Yeah. And this directly attacks the standard industry practice of selling AI based on ROI promises. We really need to delineate those two concepts because confusing them is exactly how massive enterprise projects collapse.
Okay, let's break that down. Because an ROI promise, especially in the current tech climate, is inherently speculative.
Highly speculative.
A vendor comes in and claims their multi-agent framework will, I don't know, boost organizational productivity by 40% or reduce customer resolution times by half.
Right, and those are top-down heuristic goals. They're usually derived from tightly controlled, totally idealized case studies.
They're marketing estimates.
Exactly. They completely ignore the unique friction, the legacy technical debt, and the specific compliance hurdles of the actual buyer's organization. Chasing a 40% efficiency boost is an abstract objective. You cannot code that into a deterministic logic gate.
It sounds like the difference between buying a gym membership and hoping you get fit, that's the ROI promise, versus hiring a personal trainer who cracks your macros and reps every single day. That would be building to approved requirements.
That is a perfect analogy. Business results, as defined by the Cocobites methodology, are diametrically opposed to ROI promises. A business result is a validated, measurable milestone explicitly tied to a granular, approved requirement.
So let's trace the mechanics of an approved requirement. What does that actually look like on paper?
Well, instead of saying, Agentic AI will streamline our accounting department, which means nothing, the requirement would be heavily scoped.
Like what?
It would look something like Requirement 2.4. The agent will ingest end-of-month vendor invoices via designated email endpoints, cross-reference line items against the SAP database API, flag discrepancies exceeding a $50 threshold for human review, and autonomously route approved invoices to the payment queue.
Wow, okay.
Reducing processing latency from 5 days to 48 hours with a 99.9% accuracy rate.
That is incredibly specific.
That level of granularity is mandatory because it provides an objective failure condition. You can measure API call latency. You can measure the exact routing accuracy.
So if it doesn't hit those exact numbers...
If the agent hits 98% accuracy instead of 99.9%, the deployment halts.
Full stop.
Full stop. The engineers recalibrate the prompt constraints, they adjust the temperature settings of the model, or they refine the API access tokens. You do not move forward until that specific requirement is validated.
That sounds exhausting, honestly.
It is. But this strictness is deeply tied to the strategic intent of agentic AI. The source explicitly defines this technology as a tool for high-value, complex workflow automation.
And the distinction between a standard automation script and a complex workflow is really where the true capability and the danger of the agent lies.
Absolutely.
Because if the goal is simply to save every incoming PDF attachment to a specific cloud folder, that is a linear rule-based macro. You do not need a neural network for that.
No, you just need a basic script. A complex workflow, on the other hand, involves dynamic variables. It involves logical branching, cross-departmental routing, and critically unstructured data inputs.
Give me an example of that.
Okay, consider a multi-tiered warranty claim system.
Right.
A customer submits an email detailing a product failure, and they attach a photo of the broken part and a scanned handwritten receipt.
A nightmare to process manually.
Exactly. So the agentic AI must utilize optical character recognition to pull dates from that handwritten receipt. Then it uses natural language processing to evaluate the sentiment and the urgency of the text in the email.
Okay, so it's reading the mood.
Right. Then it runs a vector search against the legacy database to verify the serial number's warranty status. It queries the inventory API for replacement part availability, and finally, it drafts a customized response.
So it is synthesizing data across 4 different legacy systems while making judgment calls on text sentiment. That
Yes.
is undeniably complex, but what elevates it to high value? Because the source specifically says high value, complex workflows.
The value is determined by the financial and operational impact of the outcome. If a human workforce is processing those claims, the latency creates massive backlogs,
Right, it takes days.
which drives down customer retention and incurs incredibly high labor costs. So the upside of the AI executing it perfectly in seconds is transformative for the bottom line.
But the downside risk is equally magnified.
Exactly. If the agent misinterprets the sentiment analysis, or if it hallucinates a policy exception because the requirements weren't strictly defined.
It might just automatically authorize full refunds for out-of-warranty products.
Yes. In a high-value workflow, a misaligned agent can hemorrhage millions of dollars before a human supervisor even logs in for the morning.
Which brings us to the concept of technical debt. It's a term borrowed from software engineering, but the document applies it specifically to these unvalidated AI pilots.
Yes, and it's a crucial concept.
Because when a company bypasses that strict requirement methodology we just talked about and they rush a deployment just to show immediate results to the board, they incur this debt.
Right. Technical debt is essentially the compounding interest of architectural shortcuts.
Like taking out a high-interest loan on your code.
That's exactly what it is.
Hmm.
In traditional software, if you hard code a database connection, instead of building a dynamic API just to save a week of development time, the software works today.
Sure, it gets the job done now.
But 3 years later, when the database migrates, the entire application breaks.
Yeah.
And fixing it requires tearing down the fundamental architecture.
Right.
With agentic AI, though, technical debt behaves very differently. It is far more opaque.
Because the reasoning trace of a large language model is inherently a black box. You can't just read the code to see why it made a decision.
Precisely. If you deploy a sprawling, multi-agent system without strict documented requirements, tying every single action to a specific API endpoint or data source, you completely lose the ability to diagnose failure.
So if something goes wrong, you are totally blind.
Yeah, exactly. Imagine returning to that system 6 months later after model drift has occurred.
A model drift.
Yeah, that's when the underlying language model has been updated by the provider. Say, OpenAI or Anthropic updates their model, subtly altering how it interprets complex instructions.
So the foundation shifts underneath you.
Right. And suddenly, your agent starts misrouting financial documents. Without a rigorously documented requirement map, your IT team won't know if the failure is happening in the OCR parsing phase, the vector database retrieval, or the final logical branching.
Diagnosing the issue essentially becomes an archaeological excavation.
It's a nightmare. The AI ceases to be a productivity asset and becomes this massive IT liability that consumes huge resources just to keep it contained.
But wait, I have a question about this. If the methodology is this strict, does it stifle the magic and innovation that agentic AI is supposed to bring? I mean, there is an inherent tension here.
How do you mean?
Well, the whole appeal of large language models and autonomous agents is their emergent capability, right? They can find novel solutions, synthesize disparate ideas, and operate outside of strict hard-coded logic trees.
That's the promise, yes.
So if we force every single AI action through a gauntlet of pre-approved, highly restrictive requirements, aren't we kind of smothering the technology? Aren't we just treating a highly advanced reasoning engine like a glorified calculator?
This raises an important question, and it's actually central to enterprise architecture. The debate over whether discipline stifles innovation.
Right.
The counterintuitive reality is that in a corporate ecosystem, boundless technological freedom does not yield innovation. It yields fragmented, unsustainable science experiments.
Yeah.
True innovation actually requires structural boundaries to channel raw power into utility.
So the constraints actually act as a focusing mechanism.
Exactly. Consider the physics of a laser versus a floodlight.
Okay.
A floodlight scatters energy in every direction. It illuminates a wide area superficially, but it cannot penetrate deeply.
Sure.
A laser forces that exact same amount of energy through a highly restrictive narrow aperture. The constraint aligns the photons, creating a concentrated beam capable of cutting through steel.
Wow. So unrestricted AI pilots are floodlights.
Yes, They do cool tricks, they summarize emails, they generate marketing copy, but they don't fundamentally alter the operational capacity of the business.
But by forcing the agentic AI through the aperture of a highly specific, complex, approved requirement.
You align all of its computational power to solve a deeply entrenched business problem.
You are aiming the laser at the structural bottlenecks of the company.
Precisely.
Okay, so we have established the need for the hymn sheet audit to secure the foundation. We have outlined the strict methodology of building to approved requirements to avoid the compounding opacity of technical debt.
Right.
But corporate environments are not static. I mean, the moment a system goes live, the variables begin to change. When unexpected disruptions occur, when the technology suddenly evolves or a new regulatory framework is imposed, how does the system survive?
That is the ultimate question.
And here's where it gets really interesting. This takes us to the master metaphor of the source material.
Yes, the final section of the document. It introduces this conceptual framework designed to govern the entire life cycle of the system. They present it as the master scroll, detailing the philosophy of architecting the uncharted bridge.
I love this story. So the text describes builders constructing a massive bridge into unknown territory. The uncharted bridge essentially represents the deployment of agentic AI.
Correct.
And the builders are utilizing cutting-edge, incredibly heavy new steel, which represents the autonomous agents, the advanced cloud processing capabilities, the neural networks, all of that.
Shiny new tech.
Right. But the builders discovered that the structural integrity of this bridge into the future does not rely solely on the tensile strength of the new steel. It relies entirely on its seamless integration with the existing supports.
And those existing supports represent the legacy bedrock of the enterprise. We are talking about the decades-old relational databases, the established supply chain workflows, the human workforce, the institutional memory, and even the core company culture.
The stuff that isn't glamorous at all.
Exactly. You cannot suspend a massive, dynamic, autonomous architecture in midair and expect it to hold its own weight. It must anchor into the reality of the business.
And the critical turning point in the text occurs when the bridge is struck by what they call the winds of uncertainty.
Right.
The architects face a massive crisis as the structure begins to destabilize. Now, the natural instinct, particularly in the tech sector, would be to rush out and procure newer, stronger steel, to upgrade the AI models, to buy a more advanced multi-agent framework.
Fix the new problem with newer tech?
Exactly. But the story explicitly states that the architects did not build more new structures. Instead, they returned to the base to retension the original cables.
And that phrase, retensioning the original cables, contains the entire operational philosophy of the Cocobites methodology.
It's so profound.
It really is. Because to understand why returning to the base is the only viable solution, we have to analyze what these winds of uncertainty represent technically and economically.
Okay, let's do that.
We are operating in an environment of extreme volatility right now. API endpoints are deprecated without warning. Model providers update their foundation models, subtly shifting the reasoning capabilities of the agents relying on them.
Like we talked about with model drift.
Exactly. Geopolitical shifts force immediate changes to data privacy regulations, requiring override adjustments to cloud storage protocols.
And when those winds hit, the sheer weight and complexity of the new agentic AI system acts as a massive sail, catching all that turbulence and transferring unprecedented kinetic energy down into the legacy systems.
Yes. In structural engineering, when a suspension bridge experiences dynamic loading from high winds, the roadway itself is rarely the point of failure.
It's the supports.
Right. The danger is that the transferred stress will rip the anchor blocks out of the earth or snap the main suspension cables.
Wow.
In the enterprise, when the AI model starts hallucinating due to an unexpected update, or when a new data source corrupts the vector database, the AI itself isn't what breaks. What breaks is the accounting system the AI feeds into. What breaks is the customer service pipeline.
So practically speaking, what does retensioning the original cables look like for, say, a chief technology officer or an operations manager? How do they actually do that?
It is the active, continuous maintenance of operational maturity. When the AI output begins to degrade, you do not immediately rewrite the agent's prompts. You return to the base.
Okay.
You execute another data cleanse on the legacy servers because untagged files have crept back in. You review your Azure IAM roles because employee turnover has created ghost accounts with access privileges.
You're constantly auditing.
Yes, you sit down with the legal department to ensure the fundamental definition of a compliant contract hasn't shifted underneath the AI's logic gates. Essentially, you rerun the hymn sheet audit.
It is the realization that an intelligent system is completely reliant on the structural integrity of the dumb system supporting it.
That is a perfect way to phrase it.
If the bridge is shaking, you fix the anchor blocks.
Exactly. And retensioning is a dynamic process. The assumption that digital transformation is a finite project with an end date is a complete fallacy.
Right, you're never actually done transforming.
Never. Because the new steel of agentic AI is constantly evolving, the tension on the legacy systems is constantly shifting. The original cables must be actively monitored and adjusted precisely because they're bearing the burden of the new intelligence.
But you know, this philosophy stands in direct opposition to the dominant narrative of Silicon Valley over the last 2 decades. We are always told innovation means out with the old, in with the new.
Move fast and break things.
Exactly. The prevailing wisdom says that legacy systems are inherently obsolete, that they are dead weight holding back progress, and that true transformation requires burning down the old infrastructure to build a cloud-native future. But this philosophy explicitly states the opposite. It's almost like tuning a vintage guitar so it can play alongside a modern synthesizer.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the move fast and break things ethos is viable when you are building consumer social applications, where the cost of failure is a dropped connection or a delayed text message.
Right, low stakes.
But it is a catastrophic philosophy when dealing with autonomous enterprise systems. If an agentic AI breaks a legacy supply chain database, manufacturing halts.
Millions of dollars lost.
Exactly. So the Cocobites document offers a profound counter-narrative. The strength of the crossing depends on the seamless integration with the old.
It's an architectural harmonization. You aren't forcing the legacy systems to become something they aren't. You are ensuring they are structurally sound enough to support the new weight.
And the source text concludes the Master Scroll narrative with a defining philosophical stance. It says, innovation is not about replacing the old, but about bringing it into harmony with the new.
I love that.
And harmonization requires an organizational humility that is often lacking in tech deployments. It demands a deep respect for the institutional knowledge embedded within those legacy cables.
Because they've survived this long for a reason. Yeah.
Exactly. A 20-year-old on-premise database might be slow and cumbersome, sure. But its architecture reflects 2 decades of hard-won battles, edge case resolutions, and specific business realities. If you arbitrarily sever those cables to attach your workflow entirely to a shiny new LLM, you lose all of that structural integrity.
The uncharted bridge only functions if the tension between the legacy bedrock and the new steel is perfectly balanced.
Precisely.
And this framework scales far beyond enterprise IT infrastructure. For everyone listening, when you are trying to learn a new skill or integrate a massive change into your own life, navigating your career, the pressure to constantly abandon your past experience in favor of the newest trend or tool is overwhelming.
Oh, absolutely.
But the architecture of personal growth requires the same harmonization. When you integrate a disruptive change into your workflow, you don't throw out the foundational discipline that got you there. You retension your own original cables to carry the weight of a new chapter.
The prerequisite for handling immense new power is profound, foundational maturity.
Well said. Let's synthesize the architecture we've explored in this deep dive. We started by confronting the illusion of the AI hype cycle, recognizing that agentic AI is not a magic button, but an autonomous force that requires a perfectly stable environment.
Right.
We examined the necessity of the hymn sheet audit, confronting the really unglamorous reality that optimizing existing tools like SharePoint metadata and Azure cloud architecture is mandatory before adding neural networks to the mix.
And then we detailed the precise mechanics of escaping technical debt by actively rejecting speculative ROI promises in favor of validated business results.
Yeah.
We established that agentic AI must be strictly aimed at high-value, complex workflow automation, using approved requirements as the laser aperture to channel the model's capabilities safely.
And finally, we decoded the philosophy of the uncharted bridge. We learned that when the volatile winds of uncertainty strike the enterprise, the solution is never to blindly add more new steel. The solution is to return to the anchor blocks and retension the original cables. True innovation is the painstaking engineering work of bringing the old into harmony with the new.
It's beautifully put. And as we conclude, I want to present a final consideration regarding the trajectory of this architecture.
Okay.
The source text places the burden of harmonization entirely on the human architects. The engineers returning to the base to tighten the legacy cable so the structure can support the agentic AI.
Right.
But if we project the evolution of these highly autonomous systems forward, is there a future iteration of the uncharted bridge where the AI itself detects the dynamic loading from the winds of uncertainty? Could the agentic system be architected to actively audit, diagnose, and autonomously retension the foundational databases and cloud configurations it relies upon? Will the bridge of the future maintain its own anchor blocks, or will human harmony always be required at the base?
A profound architectural question for the road ahead. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep examining the ground you stand on, keep testing the foundations beneath your own new steel, and we will catch you next time.